What's up, everybody? You're listening to Salah's Corner with the one and only Salah Muhammad. So on today's episode, I'm sitting with Councilmember Derek Green. He's running for re-election. He is an at-large member of Philadelphia City Council. And we got so engaged in talking. We really started talking about how I started the podcast, which took us into the importance of having millennials engaged in our political process. I think that's one of the things that tends to get lost in how we interact with newer generations that come of age in our world, and how we teach civic responsibility in our schools, how we engage in political discourse in our everyday lives. Is it a space where people feel like they can express themselves, they can talk about some challenges that are present within their lives and within their community, but also some specific policy questions about the 10-year tax abatement, how we can help local businesses open and start and stay thriving within our community, and how would you say nuances of gentrification and what that means for a city of Philadelphia and the makeup and how we go forward in our generation. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering how I make my podcast sound so crisp and clean. Well, I have to thank the folks at Rec Philly. They provide me the space, the time, and equipment to make this podcast happen. And it doesn't just end there. It's also an opportunity to connect with other creative individuals just like me. And not just other podcasters. I'm talking writers, musicians, photographers, anyone that considers themselves a creative individual. So if that's you, head on down to Rec Philly. It is super affordable. The memberships are great, and it's an opportunity to flex your creative muscles. If that's you, I hope to see you there soon.
So how long have you been doing a podcast?
So I've been doing a podcast since December.
Okay.
I started
December of
2018.
Okay.
I started writing in 2016.
Right. Okay.
And I've always been very politically inclined, but I just didn't know what avenue I wanted to direct my
and when
attention.
you say writing, what type of writing are you doing?
Blog.
Okay, blogs.
So I started writing political blogs
Okay.
back then.
Okay.
And I mean, obviously, there was a lot of
Is it 2016?
2016.
So that's right around the time the current occupant of public
That is
housing
correct.
on Pennsylvania Avenue got selected by some.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I mean, just politics in general, just started. It was tension, a lot of tension and a lot of focus on what was happening in our world, not just locally, but throughout the country.
Needing an outlet. Too.
Needing an outlet to find it. And the one thing that I started to find, especially as I started writing more, is there's not many outlets for people of my age, my demographic. When you turn on the TV, you see politics are covered by people that don't necessarily look like me. And then we are also told that we can't have some political conversations in particular spaces. So I'm looking around and trying to figure out, well, where can I have this conversation?
Right.
I want to know about things, or I want people within my network and my community and my friends to know things and be able to talk about things, but nobody feels they either are versed enough, they have the space to do it, they're not smart enough, all of the things that people think, or this isn't the right space to talk about. It's just, how do we move forward if we can never talk about it?
Right.
So that's kind of what started that's what made me migrate from the blog to the podcast. And it's like, I want to be able to provide that space for people who don't feel like they have that space.
And do you have a specific angle or is that kind of naturally formed over time? Like, I noticed that I'm blogging from a certain perspective, or I'm having conversations, but the conversation are going to a certain dynamic.
I make no, mistakes, or I don't try to hide it, that I am very liberal in my views. But my main focus is trying to get as many people to participate in our political process as possible. One of my friends is conservative, Peruvian, voted Republican, and I had him on a podcast and we talked about it. What does it mean to be conservative? What does it mean to be a minority and conservative? And let's have these spaces where we can talk about it. And one, we can learn from each other, but it just promotes the idea that it is okay to talk about politics. And this is the space where you can
having
do it.
dialogue.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of things get missed in our political discourse that, again, people my age, we are told to either, we don't know enough, or we can't talk about it at work, can't talk about it at family gatherings. School didn't really teach too much for people that are my age, that are out of high school, out of college, they're in the workforce, they're struggling to pay bills, and to maybe their degree isn't really contributing to their career like they thought they would, all of the different things that come into place.
And when you say don't talk about it during family gatherings, to me that's where most people got their first introduction to politics, at the kitchen tables, at the barbershop. I mean, some of the most detailed, analytical, political, scientific type conversations happened with me at the barbershop in 19th and Erie, where people are dissecting global political dynamics in a barbershop that other people walk in and are like, what are they talking about?
And it's something that I noticed. It happens with people of influence or people who come from affluence, people that are in the political machinery, but it doesn't necessarily always happen to people that live in communities of poverty. They're not necessarily, at least, in certain situations. I know within my network of friends, and that's kind of where this was born, that they weren't having those political conversations at home growing up. They weren't listening to their parents talk about the things that were happening in the world or within Philadelphia. They weren't overhearing some of the things they were watching on the news. That just didn't take place for them. So what I found is there's a bubble that exists within people who engage in politics, that people outside of politics who don't work in it, live and breathe it every day, don't feel like they're included in those conversations.
Do you think that's generational?
Yes,
because
100%.
When you say that, I mean, I'm just reflecting on my barbershop, which is right in North Philadelphia, and any issue that's in any bit of pop culture is discussed in the barbershop on all issues, from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to the Mueller report. I mean, you would think you're watching Hardball or Firing Line. I mean, because people are debating, and people get very engaged in the conversation.
That's great.
And that's something that I've always seen, no matter various environments I've been in, especially in the whole concept of the barbershop is very interesting. That's why, LeBron James has his show, The Shop, and how he brings in different perspectives. And they've kind of slightly captured the barbershop. They're actually getting people getting their haircut in the shop. So it kind of gets that concept, although it's a little staged.
Right.
But the barbershop is an area that I've often called that is the Union League for urban Philadelphia, where you have people come in, especially men of color. It's always been a safe space where people can just have conversations on a whole host of issues, and you find some people being somewhat conservative and espousing views, and some much more liberal, and all kinds of in between.
Right.
And you see how people exchange, and people's thoughts may change slightly based on who's more vocal, who's more aggressive, who's more dynamic in their point. I mean, to me, it's a debate society, from my observation. So, and
that's kind of the importance of having normalcy around political conversations, is you get to flesh out those ideas that just that are kind of fringe and don't work. But when we don't have a culture that promotes conversations around political engagement, that doesn't promote education, and not in college, I'm talking grade school, high school, that's promoting civic responsibility, you have a very disengaged voting population, to the point where millennials are certainly voting at much lower rates than any of the previous generations. And that is a product of, in my opinion at least, that's a product of segregating political conversations to a very particular class of individuals. I don't know necessarily if it's purposeful or not. I'm not making any claims to that, but I think that is if we don't engage in that topic of how do we make politics much more normal, because my ability to find health insurance shouldn't be something that I can't talk about. My ability to find housing should be something that I should be able to talk about and find solutions on and feel comfortable having those conversations. But people don't, that I'm finding, at least within my network or within different communities and people that I connect with. the focus tends to be on pop culture. You know, what new song, what's the new dance, what's the latest gossip and celebrity news, and not, you know, somebody can cite, you know, the latest Cardi B song, and I like Cardi B, but someone can cite, you know, say her lyrics really well.
Back and forth on Cardi B.
I
respect the hustle, though. I
I
respect
do.
the hustle from where she came. I'm a very, very critical person,
Yeah.
and I'm a very strong. I mean, I am of hip hop culture, and the lyrics got. And so for me, I'm really critical on lyricist and delivery and flow. So like a KRS-One,
Yes.
to a Rakim. So just having a nice hook that's like the basic.
I completely agree
and
with
the
that.
music,
And
it's-
the reason why I like her is because she is a genuine person.
But that's why I
And
love
what
that.
you see is what you get from
That's
her.
why I love. She is authentic and raw. I love that and where she came from. That I love the hustle and authenticity.
But people can have opinions about
Right.
that, and they do.
Right.
But when it comes to the normalcy around, that's much more of a normal conversation than having a conversation on, well, did you know that Philadelphia ranks the highest in the big cities in poverty? You know, did you know that the millennial voting population has voted historically much less than baby boomers or any other previous generation? You know, so those types of conversations just aren't things that happening. You know, when we talk about what does the city council do? You know, I regularly do polls on my Instagram page and ask people, you know, do you know what city council does? People don't know. You know, they don't know. They don't know what the responsibilities of city council versus the federal government. You know, we have expectations of our president that are rightful, but sometimes do those expectations actually line up with what we expect? When we talk about deficit, for example, people correlate that to, well, if we blow up the deficit, that means I'm going to have less money to spend for me. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily how that works. You know, so the understanding of how our government works is a fundamental problem with our engagement with politics in Philadelphia and across the country. With that said, you know, and I keep going back to that point of our voting population, especially for people like me, millennials, people that are in their 30s and between 30s and I guess early.
Yeah, what's the official cutoff?
I think the official. I don't agree with this generational thing because I'm an older millennial,
Right.
but
Someone say a seasoned millennial.
I'm a seasoned millennial, and
That's an inside joke.
well, I need to know what the inside joke
so
is now.
my dad is 83. So he says he's not a senior citizen. He's a seasoned citizen.
I like
I
that.
said, okay, Dad, I got one better for you. If you can be a seasoned citizen, I can be a seasoned millennial. And so now I have millennials on my staff that whenever I could actually hear them griping right now as we speak. Because whenever I make that joke, they're like, "You're really using that joke again?" I should trademark it because I'm waiting for it to come back around.
You should trademark it.
Right.
Do it before I do because I'm going to start using that now. I am very good at telling some good dad jokes.
Right.
And I feel like that's up there
I'm
in the
waiting for
dad
like
joke
somewhere
range.
President Obama will say, "I'm a grandfather millennial, not a seasoned millennial, a grandfather millennial." It's like, see, it worked. It got around the world.
Yeah.
Just joking.
But like, yeah, I'm a seasoned millennial,
Okay.
and I don't necessarily, you know, my upbringing and the way I grew up without the internet, you know, versus some of the younger millennials. That's all they knew. The cell phones and the kind of everything. So, you know, that kind of exists, but there isn't I forgot where I was going, but there isn't the space for from a generational perspective.
Right.
There's a break in our engagement and our lack of interest in how politics is normalized in our country. In your perspective, is that something that you see? Is that a problem that you see not just within Philadelphia on how we can engage millennials more, the younger generation, different avenues of get out the vote, and all of those things that typically come around every 4 years mostly?
Well, I think we're going through a dynamic in reference to technology and the political industry, and those who are providing services as part of politics. Either they are campaign advisors or campaign consultants or media consultants. They're still trying to work through this new technology. It seems like every 4 to 8 years is a new piece of technology, and now people are all trying to scramble how to use it. I remember at one point when everyone had to have a website. You have to have a website.
Right.
But then having a website, but if you're not really drawing people to it and you're not doing anything with the website, it's kind of static.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went from you got to have a website to you got to have a Twitter, Instagram, Facebook page. But if you're not doing anything to drive content toward it and keeping the content fresh, people don't really go to it. And it was a point of like you've got to have it just for the sake of having it. But if you're not using it as a true communication tool, just like people doing phone polls or TV ads or radio ads, you've got to find ways to use it as a tool. And I think now we're going through this transition of how do we use these forms of technology to better communicate with constituents and people in the community. From either I try to do things like Facebook Live on a Thursday morning before City Council, trying to explain to people and give people a perspective of what's coming up, what's coming down the pike in City Council, or if I have a bill I'm introducing, I'll do a Facebook Live piece, or just going around the city to different activities, different locations, putting it on either Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, just trying to find ways to connect. We were just talking about I do a quarterly public access show, which I record and we put on my YouTube channel. So just trying to create, and we're trying to tweak that a little bit too. I have another idea about how we do town hall meetings in a way that can make yourself as accessible as possible, because not everyone can come to City Hall on a Thursday at 10 a.m. So having a way where people can interact and ask questions whenever. So I think going back to the original point, a lot of different elected officials and those in the political industry are trying to figure out what's the best means of using all this technology. From at one point, Cory Booker would be on Facebook like 24/7, and it got to me. It got too much. It's like I don't need to know every 2 seconds.
I'm glad you made that point.
That?
Yeah, because it becomes a point where it's just like you're not necessarily oversaturating, but you're just not genuine.
Right.
And you're just doing it for attention and not doing it so that you're reaching people where they are,
right,
and you're showing people who you genuinely are.
Right.
If you don't, Facebook Live while you're at the dentist, I think Beto O'Rourke did that. Like, you don't need to do it. Like, it's just that's not normal.
And to me, it reminds me of, and I'm not a big self-promoter, and it reminds me of like the Truman Show,
yes,
or Ed TV, and I'm just here. Look, I'm having my chai latte while I'm doing yoga in downward pose at 7 a.m. in the morning. I don't know if I need to know
that. No, that's too much information.
Right, it's TMI. But if it's information like I'm on the floor of Congress or in City Council and something's happening that people need to know about, or I'm an agent, I'm at an NFL draft, and people want to know right now what's happening in reference to their sports team, whatever, that's different. You're then giving people an opportunity to be in the room, right, where they normally could not be. That's why I see the Twitter and Facebook Live being beneficial. But the just constant promotion, I think, is part of the pop culture dynamic, and you talked about a little bit earlier, that we're in this constant self-promotion all the time, which I think is, I don't know if it's really good, because it becomes very, I hate to use the word vapid, but it's not real reality. It's like, right, we're doing reality for the sake of saying it's reality, right, but it's not really reality. It's really staged shows to make it seem like it's reality. But if you're watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta, or you're watching Basketball Wives, or you're watching hip hop, whatever, this is staged. Well, I hope most people realize this is staged.
Yes,
it looks like it's reality, and it makes me think of that Roots video, what they do, and you see everyone
I love
walking,
that video. Yeah,
everyone walking. It's like, hey, this is not real. This is rented. This is just grape juice, not champagne. and it makes me think about that. And like that show that was on BET, The Real Husbands of Hollywood, and it was like all
the celebrity. Yeah,
it was, because that's, to me, what it really is.
Right.
These people are not living this way, but they're making it seem they're living this way, and it's having a challenging impact, I think, on young people.
It is. One of the things so what I try to do for this platform is I specifically target individuals who are making a good presence within social media, and that's really what gravitated me towards you. Is your platform is genuine, but you're also using it to really get out information and not just promote yourself, like kind of what you hinted to. I did, like I said, when we were speaking earlier, I saw your Facebook Live interview yesterday, and it was really in depth on policy, which I think was fantastic. It covered a lot of things, and I was like shouting questions into my phone as I'm watching it. But I think that is, and also shout out to who's doing your social media, because again, that is really how you came on my radar, and I think that's a way for millennials to gravitate towards understanding and normalizing politics for them. But let's dive a little bit deeper, because the next generation behind us, behind millennials, what is it? I guess Gen Z. I think that's what it is. I think that's what letter is next. But that generation that's coming of age, that it's in school now, what are your feelings or ideas when it comes to engaging that younger generation on politics and normalizing it for them, so that they have a seat at the table as they start to come of age, and the next person that's going to be in my seat, looking for an outlet or looking to create that community for themselves?
Well, I try to engage, and I try to look at things like voter registration. So we have a National Voter Registration Day, which is always, I believe, in the fall. So I generally speak at various high schools. And when I do that, I try to do it from the perspective that, getting your voter, and the statistics will show that when someone gets their voter registration card, they're more likely to vote and more likely to do other things.
Yes.
So I try to use that and say to young people, this is your first opportunity to really demonstrate to the world you're an adult, that you have an opportunity to sign up for something independent of mom, dad, uncle, guardian, whoever. And also, once you do that, then you can make a decision on something that's important based on how you feel, based on whether you think Beto O'Rourke is a good candidate, or Mayor Pete, or Cory Booker, or Kamala Harris. You can make the decision based on how you feel without anyone else telling you you're too young, you're not right, you're not, and make that decision. And to me, I try to use the argument, this is your first step to adulthood. Before you get an apartment, before you get a car, or do this is your first step into that opportunity. And so try to use it as a perspective and saying, this is the transition from being a young person to adulthood, and use that as kind of the entree. Also, I talk about, and I'm reflecting on, I have a niece who now lives in Houston. She used to have 4 beauty salons, and they were all off Germantown, Shelton Corridor. And I would say to her that, when people talk about politics impact you from before you're born, like a birth certificate, to when you pass away, a death certificate. But in between, that dash in between, there are a lot of ways that politics impact you. So if you have a beauty salon and you're concerned that there's rules and regulations that impact you, reference to hair braiding and how you maintain your beauty salon or barbershop, there's rules and regulations that are set at the state level through a agency that regulates hair braiding. And some of these rules and regulations are based on things from, in the 40s or 50s or maybe even 60s. We're 2019.
Yeah.
So the concept of you getting other barber shops or just other beauty salons or just let's say African hair braiding salons, are able to come together and just go to your state representative and say, listen, the rules and regulations that dictate how we have got to operate our business are impacting our business in this way. We think there should be some changes because of the dynamics that was put together for those rules are based on not necessarily hair braiding, but other types of hairstyles or other type of professional services connected to hair. And so we're being told we've got to follow certain rules and regulations that are antiquated for what we are doing. But bringing a few owners together and then going to your state representative and say, listen, you represent all of us, and we have some issues and concerns. Can you take these questions to the State Department that handles licensure of hair braiding? And that's a way you can have impact. And then follow up and then finding out, okay, how can we start to make some regulatory changes? And if it's impacting you on this 100 block or a couple hundred block of Germantown near Shelton, imagine what's happening to people in Winfield or Broad and Glenwood or King Session Avenue, Southwest Philly, or even maybe Cotton Avenue, and then maybe other ethnic groups who are having other similar dynamics. And then you're starting to pull people together, and you're starting to build a political base and power, which is no different than a group of realtors that come together, a group of lawyers that come together, a group of auto dealers that come together who are saying, listen, these rules and regulations are impacting us in a negative way. You, state representative or a city council person that represents us, we want you to make some changes. You're doing exactly the same thing that people do in D.C., who are lobbyists for IT firms, for Apple and Google, who are saying that certain federal laws or tax codes are impacting us in a negative way. It's the same concept, but just getting them. I think sometimes people have this perspective that, well, that's just people that have a Harvard degree and X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
When it's no, it's just you and others who have similar issues are lobbying your elected official, because this is a representative democracy, and saying we want to see changes on what's impacting us.
The power of organization is real, and I always compare that to, if you live in a gated community, you got your homeowners association. There is rules and regulations on the color of your house, the type of fence you got, your sprinklers above ground, below ground, how high your grass is going to be, all of those things. They are organizing and setting those rules for the neighborhood, and it's just as important to do those things almost in every facet of our lives. You mentioned Germantown and Shelton. I went to Germantown High School.
Okay.
It's closed now.
I know.
A
year short of its 100th anniversary. I have some good friends
that
went to Germantown.
But that neighborhood seems to be. Let me take a step back, actually. When you look at the city as a whole, especially when you look at some of the things that are happening downtown, Love Park renovation, the fountains at City Hall and the ice skating rink. You got new hotels that are popping up in Center City. I know this because I'm formerly from the hospitality industry. And then you go out to Germantown and you see the number of businesses that have closed every year, closed. And you start to see the neighborhood starts to look dilapidated. And people that were in this community for generations have no options of really surviving. Businesses are leaving. There's not a lot of resources. The schools are diminishing. Are you seeing that from that perspective? I know for a lot of people within my community that lived in Germantown, and for people my age, they see this contrasting cities. They see Center City becoming this great new high-rise city. They got the TVs on the buildings down on Market Street. The gallery has been closed and redone, and all of these new shopping places. Yet where we live is getting worse every single year. How do we fix that contrast? What is City Council doing to kind of change that such a comparison that's taking place in our city?
Well, I definitely have a concern that we're becoming more like a Dickens novel, Tale of Two Cities. And it's not just Center City. If you look at Fishtown, Port Richmond, Kensington, you're seeing dramatic changes.
Gentrification is real.
And you're seeing gentrification, because people often think of gentrification just as a black-white issue.
Right.
But if you're a person, a long-time homeowner who's lived in Port Richmond, who more likely than not is white, your neighborhood's changed dramatically too. And you have people, I believe, 35 to 40% of the residents of Fishtown are now under 40. I've heard that stat. So if you're a long-time property owner, your neighborhood's changed dramatically, not necessarily from the fact it's going from black to white, but it's going from white to much younger people. Right. So you're seeing that, and also if you look at Passyunk, and you're seeing what people now call Center City South, like below South Street, which to me that was always South Philly once you hit South Street.
Right.
But now that's an area where people have moved to because they could not necessarily afford Center City, or just decided we want to have a house, but want to be close to the city. So you're seeing certain neighborhoods change dramatically. Some of that is based on, I think, the 10-year tax abatement.
Yes.
But I'm also, so when you talk with Germantown, I've seen some changes in Germantown. There's been some pocket areas and communities that have been stable for a long time, areas like West Central Germantown, Penn Knox community. But if you're on, let's say Shelton, and when you're on Shelton and Wayne, and you look at, and you're on Shelton intersection of Wayne Shelton, and you're looking towards Wissahickon, things look dramatically different if you turn around 180 degrees and you're at Wayne Shelton and looking towards Germantown Avenue. So you're seeing a lot of investment from Alden Park, Park Heights, the SEPTA investment, the new shopping center there. But the other direction, you don't see the same development. But you're also seeing some pockets of developments in other areas. I think Germantown's really an interesting community, especially on the end at the lower, well, we'll say the Wayne Shelton area, because I see that starting to make some real changes. There's been some real infill development that you don't see just naturally, but if you start walking around parts of Germantown, you're seeing a lot of homes being redeveloped, especially in that west central Germantown area. And I think from a council perspective, we've got to continue to look at how we can help people to stay in their homes. So we've introduced and passed legislation like the long-time owner-occupant program, increasing the income levels so more people can participate in that program and stay in their homes. But also other initiatives, like I've done legislation to help small businesses because that's a big focus of mine. I think the best way to address poverty is by growing small businesses because small businesses are the greatest creator of jobs. So most of my legislative focus has been on how do we help small businesses to grow, either by the Philadelphia Business Lending Network that I created with the Commerce Department, where we brought 30 banks to get the banks, lenders, other smaller based entities like credit unions together to create a one-page application to make it easier for small businesses to get access to credit, or some of my legislation like a local procurement initiative and best value to make it easier for local businesses, especially businesses of color, to do more business with the city of Philadelphia. And I think that's going to help spur some of the development that we need on our commercial corridors, which will also help more redevelopment in all parts of the city, not just a select few that are close to Center City.
You mentioned the 10-year tax abatement. Can you explain what that is and the problems that may exist with it, or the counter arguments to it, I should say?
So the 10-year tax abatement was something that was started about 20 years ago. Initially, it was just on commercial buildings, and then it was expanded to residential buildings. And what that abatement does is that when you buy a property, and let's say you have a vacant lot, so you'll pay taxes on the vacant lot. If you buy that lot and then apply for the 10-year tax abatement that's approved by the city, then any development that you do on that parcel, and you've got to go through all the proper zoning and L&I channels, but any development that you do on that lot, you just pay taxes on what you bought the lot for. So if it's a vacant piece of land, you only pay taxes for the vacant value of the land. But if you build a high-rise on it, or a two-story home, or a three-story home, that new structure, you don't pay taxes on the new structure for 10 years. Now, the city has done some changes more recently to try to capture some additional tax revenue. For example, with that parcel of land that you may have bought and you were paying just the taxes on that, the city's done some reassessments of properties and have increased the value of that land. So some people that have a 10-year tax abatement have complained that, yes, I'm not paying taxes on the new structure, but then you increase the assessment value of the land I bought initially. Right. So there's been a lot of conversation regarding 10-year tax abatement. It was done at a time when the city is not like it is now, and we needed some major investment. But I think we're having conversations in the city council anywhere from get rid of it altogether to extend it to maybe 20 years in certain target areas of the city, and all kinds of other ideas in between. So we'll continue to have a conversation about the abatement. But, a lot of the revenue that we've been able to use for education, like last year we did over $600 million in our 5-year plan for education, that came from expired abatements. The abatement started 20 years ago. The mayor proposed another $20 million this year for schools. That's revenue that's based on expired tax abatements. So that's $800 million just based on revenue that would come into the city from expired abatements that are not based on tax increases. So it's definitely been a challenge because you have some areas that are going some dramatic changes. You look at Point Breeze, as well as some areas we talked about earlier, like Fishtown and Port Richmond, and you look at some other neighborhoods in the city where the abatements are really having an impact. And so how do we balance those things? And also look at other jurisdictions. So I'm very active in the National League of Cities as part of the Large City Council. I'm the second vice president for Pennsylvania Municipal League, and also an officer in the National Black Caucus of local elected officials. So I'm reaching out to my colleagues in other cities to find out how they're dealing with some of these issues, because if it's happening in Philadelphia, it's happening in other
Absolutely.
states. D.C., I'm good friends with Mayor Muriel Bowser, and D.C. historically was known as Chocolate City.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to D.C. now,
there's some problems in D.C.
in
right
fact,
now.
there was an article just recently about Howard University, and now if you're an
Yeah.
HU grad,
Yep.
you know the yard is kind of hollowed ground, and so you had new people that moved into the community, and you know Howard, you know, it's in the 14th and U area, 16th and U area, and who said, well, the university should move because we want to be able to walk our dogs on a yard. And it's like, I'm sorry, Howard University should move?
Right.
Howard University, which has been, it's literally called the Mecca.
Right.
So you're going to say, we're going to move the Mecca just because you moved here in the past 5 years and now you're going to walk your dog? So it's those type of things that we need to have better conversations. And I think anyone that comes into a community, regardless of your ethnic persuasion, you need to get to know the community. There's something about a community that attracted you. So you need to learn about that community and become part of the community before you decide what's best for that community.
I have a number of different questions that I want to continue this conversation around, but I don't want to keep all of your time.
Okay.
But I have one more question.
But we can do this again. I tend to try to do, I'm a pretty open book. Sometimes my staff gets mad because I do a lot of different meetings, a lot of different activities. So I'd love to, and I'm still learning the whole podcast concept.
Yes.
I have friends who are really into podcasts.
Podcasts are the new wave. It's a new thing.
And I'm learning. So I'm always open to get perspectives because I know a lot of people use podcasts as a way to communicate. I've not become a podcast person, but I'm learning this type of medium and how it's a way of interacting with people and how you can get that information out. So I'm willing to learn. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming. I'm glad you are willing to come back. But my final question is probably want to be my easiest one. And what's your most favorite thing in the world right now?
Wow, my most favorite thing in the world
I
right
always
now,
say it's the
outside
easiest,
of
but I
my
stump
wife and my
everyone.
son.
Yes. They could be in.
Well, they're definitely. I say my wife and son just because they are putting up with me with all the stuff I'm doing over the past number of months. I mean, I get up most days at 4:45 to try to get a little bit of gym time in, and then when I come home, you know, my wife goes to work around 7, so I'm get back around 6:30. Get up, make my son's breakfast, feed the dog, take a shower, make sure he gets ready. He gets on the bus. Then I'm on conference call and meetings, and then I'm downtown until 5, 6, 7. Then I'm running around to different ward meetings and canvas forums, and then getting back at 10, 9, 10:30, trying to check in with my son and wife.
They are patient with you.
They've been very patient,
Yes.
and I'm blessed to be able to have them in my life for what they do and inspire me, especially having a child on the autism spectrum. And so Julian does a lot of seeing him being able to achieve what he's been able to achieve and the barriers that have been in front of him inspires me to do more.
That's amazing and beautiful. We have been sitting with council member
Yes.
at large,
And that's another
Derek Green.
conversation, man to member.
That is another conversation. Now, I've been working on making sure I correct myself,
Yes.
so that no one else can come for me.
Right.
But council member at large, Derek Green. It was really a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the time.
I definitely want to have some other conversations after this. I'd like to get an idea of some community policing and some criminal justice within Philadelphia crime and some other areas that we weren't able to get to today. But thank you for coming. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you. I'd like to be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Very special thanks to Councilmember Derek Green for sitting with me today. After the interview, we got super, super nerdy. I hope he appreciates me saying this. And we started talking Marvel and DC, Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Star Trek. A very, very relatable guy. So if you like what you hear, primary elections are May 21st. Get out there and vote, y'all. Again, the more people that are engaged in our civic discourse, the better our politics are, the better our government is, the more accountable elected officials are, and we just improve our lives overall. And I go back to that because that has been the basis of my platform, of this podcast and my blog, is how we engage with people within our community and our network and normalize politics so that everybody has a space to speak. And I ask that question to you. Do you have that space to speak? If you don't, find that. I try to make that a space here at Salah's Corner and make that welcoming to everyone of all ideas. And that's how you flesh out some of those negative and bad ideas or ideas that just don't work or are a detriment to the well-being of a community and of the country. So look out for different ways on how you can engage in our political discourse. And again, ask yourself that question: do I have a space to engage in politics? As always, you can reach me at realtalk@salazcorner.com. Submit your questions, give me any ideas, thoughts, tell me how much you disagree with me. If you have any guest suggestions, you can also email me there as well. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Salaz Corner, and check out my latest blog piece at salazcorner.com. Until next time, peace, y'all.